In 1950, 50 people traveled to Nepal to the northeastern slopes of Kanchenjunga, searching for a creature that the Sherpas whispered about. They carried cameras, guns, and forms for scientific specimens, but found tracks too wide for any known animal and a silence that did not belong in mountains where birds should be singing. What awaited them at those heights left 45 men without a shred of evidence, and 5 without the right to return. So, before we continue, please make sure you're subscribed and let us know where you're watching from. Thank you. I was 34 years old when we entered the Gungsa Valley. The morning of our departure from base camp brought that special kind of cold that doesn't cut, but presses down. The air was dry and thin, with a hint of snow, even though the sky was clear all the way to the horizon. The sun had not yet risen above the eastern ridge, and shadows lay in blue stripes on the slopes, where the night frost had not yet melted. I remember how the steam from my breath hung motionless in front of my face. There was no wind at all, and that in itself seemed wrong for November at such an altitude. Our group, the 7th of 10, was assigned the northeast sector above the main valley, where the summer pastures gave way to rocky scree and glacial moraines. The expedition was organized along military lines. 10 groups of 5 people, each with a clear route, communication schedule, and rendezvous points. The Royal Geographical Society provided funding, offering a $5,000 reward for irrefutable evidence of the Yeti's existence. Photographs, wool samples, footprint casts. We carried plaster for casts, glass tubes for biological samples, 2 Leica cameras with a supply of film, and enough optimism to believe that science could capture the legend through a lens. Captain Reginald Ashford led our group. He was short in stature but broad-shouldered, with the weather-beaten face of a man who had spent 20 years in the Himalayas. First with the Gurkha Regiment, then with mountaineering expeditions. He wore an old army jacket, altered to civilian style, and a Lee Enfield rifle slung across his shoulder. His hands, as he checked the map, moved with the precision of a man accustomed to altitude and cold. Ganesh Thapa walked second. He was 47 years old and knew these mountains as well as he knew his own home. Every trail, every pass, every name the locals gave to the rocks and streams. His face was dark from the sun and wind, lined with wrinkles, and his eyes squinted even in the shade, accustomed to the glare of the snow. He carried an ice axe with a worn handle and a bag of sampa, roasted barley flour that Sherpas eat mixed with tea. Dr. Arthur Penrose, a zoologist from the University of Edinburgh, was the oldest of us, 52 years old with a gray beard and round metal-rimmed glasses. He carried a leather satchel with dissecting instruments and a waxed paper-covered journal in which he recorded everything he saw. Birds, tracks, plants, air temperature. His fingers were stained with ink, and he constantly muttered Latin names as if they were prayers. Timothy Blackwood was the youngest, 19 years old, a Cambridge student and the son of one of the expedition's sponsors. He was tall and thin, with the awkwardness of movement that betrays a person who is not yet accustomed to his own body. He carried a second camera and looked at the mountains with the enthusiasm that only those who see them for the first time can have. I myself was a journalist, a correspondent for the Times on the expedition. My job was to document everything: meetings, discoveries, everyday life in the camp. I carried notebooks, pencils, and that special cynicism that comes to anyone who has spent 10 years chasing sensational stories. We set out at dawn, when the sun had just touched the summit of Kanchenjunga. It stood to the west, huge and white, like the throne of an ice god. A caravan of 12 yaks carried our supplies: sacks of rice and sampa, dried meat, tea and tin cans, fuel for stoves, canvas tents, sleeping bags stuffed with eiderdown. The Sherpa drivers walked alongside the animals, shouting guttural commands at them. For the first 2 days, we climbed up the Gungsa Valley, wide, open, with a stream at the bottom and rhododendron thickets on the slopes. At night, the temperature dropped below 0, but the days were clear and sunny, almost warm. Dr. Penrose collected plant samples. Timothy photographed everything in sight. Captain Ashford studied the map and made notes. Ganesh walked ahead, choosing the route. On the 3rd day, we passed the Gungsa Gompa Monastery. Several stone buildings with flat roofs clinging to the slope above the river. We stopped there for a blessing, as was customary. The abbot, an old lama in a burgundy robe, received us in a low hall that smelled of melted butter and incense. He spoke through Ganesha, and his words fell into the silence like stones into water. Ganesha translated that the lama was talking about the Mi-Go, the name the Sherpas gave to the creature we were seeking. The Lama said that the Migo was not an animal that could be caught. It was the guardian of the border between the world of men and the world of spirits. 50 men meant 50 insults. The mountains would take their toll. Some of us would return empty-handed. Some would not return at all. And one would return with knowledge he would rather not have. Captain Ashford nodded with the politeness that British officers show toward local superstitions. He offered the traditional offering, a silk scarf and a few silver coins. The Lama refused to accept it. He just looked at us, and in his eyes there was neither anger nor fear, only that special weariness that comes to people who know something that others do not want to hear. We left the monastery before noon. Timothy said that the old man probably just wanted to scare us away from his hunting grounds. Dr. Penrose recorded the Lama's words in his journal as an example of local folklore associated with a hypothetical primate. Captain Ashford said nothing. Ganesha walked in silence, his face closed like a shut book. By the evening of the 4th day, we reached the point where the caravan trail ended. Above us, there were no villages or pastures, only rock, snow, and sky. The drivers had to unload the yaks, leave us supplies, and return to the valley. We planned to spend 10 days in the highlands, then descend to the rendezvous point. That's when the first incident occurred. The yaks refused to go any further. It happened without warning. We crossed an inconspicuous ridge, just a line of rocks, no different from hundreds of others. And the animals stopped, all 12 of them, at the same time. They didn't try to turn back. They didn't moo. They just stood there, rooted to the spot, and neither the herders' shouts nor the blows of their sticks could move them. Then they began to tremble. I saw it with my own eyes, a large tremor that ran through their sides in waves. Their eyes were wide open, and they looked up the slope. All 12 heads turned in one direction, toward the rocky scree where nothing could be seen but snow and boulders. The chief driver, a man of about 60 with a face like cracked earth, approached Captain Ashford. He said something to Ganesha. Ganesha translated. The driver says the yaks will go no further. He says the animals can smell Maytek, the wild man. He says we should not go either. Captain Ashford ordered the animals to be unloaded here. We will carry the supplies ourselves. The drivers worked quickly, too quickly. Their hands were hurried and they did not look up. Half an hour later, the caravan went down the trail and we were left alone. The silence struck first. I didn't notice it right away. Only when the sound of hooves faded into the distance did I realize that I couldn't hear anything. No wind, no birds, no distant roar of streams. The mountains around us stood silent, like the walls of a temple. And in this silence, our voices sounded out of place, almost indecent. Ganesh said that there used to be a lot of game here. Mountain goats, seros, goral, birds, monks and vultures. Now he sees nothing. Dr. Penrose remarked that perhaps it was the season. Late autumn. The animals had migrated lower down. Ganesha did not respond. We set up camp near a large boulder that provided shelter from the wind. We pitched 2 tents, one for the captain and the doctor, the other for me, Ganesha, and Timothy. We lit the stove and boiled water for tea. The usual routine, the familiar rhythm, but something was wrong, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Then Timothy found the pyramids. He had left the camp to relieve himself and returned with the expression on his face that people have when they see something impossible. He said he had found something strange, and we all went to look. They were towers made of stones, 7 of them, lined up along the path that led up the slope. Each was about waist-high to an adult, made of flat stones stacked with a precision I had never seen before. The stones lay on top of each other without the slightest gap, without a single shift, as if they had been laid by a machine or a creature with superhuman patience. Ganesh said these were not turs. The turs built by Sherpas looked different, rougher, more careless. These were different. Captain Ashford asked who could have built them. Ganesh said he didn't know. He said that no humans had come here for many years. He said that these towers weren't here when he passed this way 15 years ago. Dr. Penrose measured one of the towers with the tape measure and recorded the results in his journal. His hand was steady, but I noticed him lick his lips, quickly, nervously. We returned to camp before dark. No one mentioned the towers at dinner. We ate sampa with tea and remained silent, and the silence of the mountains weighed on us like the ceiling of a cave. That night, I smelled it for the first time. It came around midnight when I was lying in my sleeping bag and staring into the darkness. At first, I thought it was Ganesh. Maybe he had brought some kind of potion or ointment with him. But the smell was different. It was sharp and old, with a hint of musk, like the smell of a goat, but more intense, thicker. And underneath it, something coppery, almost bloody, like the smell of a slaughterhouse on a hot day. I propped myself up on my elbow. Ganesha was awake. I could see the glint of his eyes in the darkness. I whispered and asked if he could feel it. He said yes. He told me not to move and not to leave the tent. The smell lingered for about half an hour, then faded away, slowly, like water soaking into sand. When it disappeared, I discovered that my shirt was wet with sweat, even though it was cold in the tent. In the morning, I didn't say anything to the captain. Ganesh was silent too, but as we were breaking camp, I noticed him looking up the slope. Long, intently, with the expression of a man waiting for something inevitable. On the 5th day, we climbed above 5,000 meters. The air at this altitude was thin and prickly, and every step was difficult. We moved slowly, stopping every 100 steps to catch our breath. Timothy suffered the most. His face was gray, and he often clutched his chest, but refused to admit weakness. Youth, pride, stupidity. By noon, we reached the ridge, which offered a view of the next valley. Narrow, rocky, with a frozen stream at the bottom. And there, in the snow, we saw tracks. Ganesh noticed them first. He stopped so abruptly that I bumped into his back. Then he knelt down and stared at the snow for a long time, not moving or saying a word. The footprints were huge. Dr. Penrose measured them with a tape measure, 45 centimeters long. The shape was similar to a human foot, but with the big toe splayed out like a monkey's. The depth of the imprint in the packed snow indicated a weight of at least 200 kilograms. The distance between the footprints was almost 2 meters. Captain Ashford ordered me to take pictures. I took 6 shots from different angles while the doctor prepared the plaster for casting. Timothy stood nearby, his eyes wide open, no longer with excitement, but with something else. Ganesha said the tracks were fresh, maybe from tonight, maybe from early this morning. Captain Ashford asked which direction they led. Ganesh pointed up the valley, where the rocky slopes gave way to a chaos of glacial moraines. We followed the tracks. It was a breach of protocol. We were supposed to contact base camp, report the find, and wait for instructions. But Captain Ashford said the tracks could be covered at any moment, and we couldn't miss this chance. 5,000 pounds. The glory of discovery. Names in zoology textbooks. The tracks led us for 3 hours. They wound between boulders, crossed frozen streams, climbed scree slopes where snow lay only in hollows. Twice we lost them and found them again. Ganesh read these mountains like a book. By evening, we reached the cave. It was small, an opening in the rock about as tall as a man, half hidden by an overhanging canopy. The entrance was dark, and the smell came from it. The same smell I had smelled in the tent at night. Musk, copper, wet wool. Captain Ashford ordered the torches lit. We went inside. The cave extended 15 meters into the rock. The floor was covered with a thick layer of rhododendron branches and yak wool, trampled and flattened. In the corner lay bones, gnawed white, some split open, apparently to extract the brains. Dr. Penrose examined them by torchlight and said they were from a goral, a mountain goat. But some of the bones were too large for a goral. There were scratches on the walls of the cave, deep, parallel, in groups of 3. Some were fresh, with white stone chips at the bottom. Some were old, darkened by time. We stood in the cave for 10 minutes, no more. Then Captain Ashford said we should set up an ambush. The creature would return to its lair. We would hide outside and wait. Ganesh said it was a bad idea. He said the Migo knew we were here. He said the creature wouldn't return while we were nearby, or it would return when it chose. Captain Ashford didn't listen. We set up camp 300 meters from the cave, behind a ridge of boulders. The night was clear and cold. The thermometer read -15. We built a small fire in a pit between the rocks so it wouldn't be visible from a distance. We set up watches. We waited. Around midnight, I heard a sound. At first, it was a low hum, so low that I felt it in my chest rather than heard it with my ears. Then it rose higher, turned into a roar, throaty, vibrating, and suddenly broke into a piercing whistle that made my ears ring. I had never heard anything like it. It wasn't the cry of an animal, at least not one I knew. There was something wrong with it, as if one throat was making 2 sounds at once. A low roar and a high-pitched whistle superimposed on each other. The sound echoed off the slopes, multiplying, returning from all sides. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from. Right, left, above, below. It seemed as if the mountains themselves were screaming. Then it stopped, and there was silence. So complete, so absolute that I could hear my own heartbeat. Ganesh sat motionless, his face pale in the light of the dying fire. He said quietly, almost in a whisper, that no animal he knew made such a sound. Timothy asked what we should do. No one answered. On the 7th day, we found an abandoned shepherd's camp. It was located above the cave, at an altitude of about 5,200 meters. 3 dilapidated stone huts clinging to the slope above the glacial moraine. The roofs had collapsed, the walls had crumbled, and the doorways gaped like black holes. Ganesh said that these were the summer pastures of yak herders, but the locals had not been here for many years. He did not say why. We entered the largest hut. Inside, it was dark and cold, and the smell, musk and copper, hung thick in the air. The beam of the lantern caught a bedding in the corner. A nest of wool and branches, similar to what we had seen in the cave, but larger. Nearby were bones, old and new mixed together. On the walls were scratches forming almost rhythmic patterns, as if someone had been drawing signs or counting time. Dr. Penrose said it was a nesting place. The creature uses the huts as a refuge. Captain Ashford said we would stay here for the night. The hut provided shelter from the wind and snow. We would be able to watch the approaches. Ganesh said we should leave. He said it calmly, without pressure, but there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. He said the Mygo doesn't like its place being taken. He said the creature would come. Captain Ashford replied that this was the plan. We reinforced the door with logs we found in the second hut. We blocked the windows with stones. We checked our weapons. The captain had a rifle, I had a hunting knife, and Ganesha had an ice axe. Dr. Penrose took an old revolver out of his bag, which he said he hadn't used in 20 years. Timothy sat in the corner and said nothing. His face was gray, and I noticed his hands were shaking. Night fell quickly. Here in the mountains, twilight lasts only a few minutes. We lit a lamp and sat around it, staring at the fire. No one spoke. Outside, there was silence. That same strange silence we had already begun to get used to. Around 9 o'clock, Timothy said he needed to go outside. Captain Ashford told him to wait until morning. Timothy replied that he couldn't wait. He got up and headed for the door, and none of us stopped him. Why? I don't know. Maybe we were all tired. Maybe we thought there was no danger. Maybe what the Lama had spoken of had already begun. The madness that the Migo sends upon those who go too far. Timothy pushed the logs aside and went out. The door remained ajar, a strip of darkness and cold. A minute passed. 2. Then a scream. Short, sharp, cut off mid-word. Then silence again. Captain Ashford grabbed his rifle and rushed to the door. Ganesh shouted for him to stop, but it was too late. The captain had already run outside, and we heard him calling Timothy's name. I looked out the doorway. The moon was almost full, and the snow glowed with a bluish light. I saw Timothy's footprints. They led around the corner of the hut. I saw the captain running along those footprints. I saw him stop. Then he slowly turned toward us. His face was white. He told us to bring the lamp. We found the snow behind the hut, bloodied, trampled, signs of a struggle. Timothy's footprints mixed with others, huge ones, the same ones we had seen before, and drag marks leading up the slope to the glacial moraine. The body was gone. Dr. Penrose knelt down and examined the snow. He said quietly that there was a lot of blood. Too much. He said Timothy was probably dead. Ganesh looked up the slope where the tracks led. His hand gripped the ice axe, his knuckles white. We returned to the hut and barricaded the door again. No one slept until dawn. In the morning, Ganesh said he would follow the tracks. He said the body had to be found. According to Sherpa custom, the dead cannot be left in the mountains without burial. Captain Ashford said it was madness. Ganesh replied that his decision was final. He left at dawn, when the sky was gray and cold. We watched him climb the slope, a small figure against the backdrop of huge boulders, until he disappeared over the ridge. He did not return. By noon, we began to worry. By evening, Captain Ashford said we should go out and look for him. Dr. Penrose objected, saying we should descend while we still could. The captain replied that he would not abandon his men. The next morning, the 3 of us climbed to the ridge behind which Ganesha had disappeared. His boot prints were clear in the snow. He had walked confidently without straying from the path. We followed them for about a kilometer to the place where they ended. Ganesha's ice axe was stuck in the snow, vertical, like a marker. Nearby, on a rock, was a tuft of wool. Reddish-brown, long, tangled, nothing else. Dr. Penrose took a sample of the wool and put it in a test tube. His hands were shaking. Captain Ashford stood motionless for a long time, staring at the ice axe. Then he said we had to go back to the hut. He said we would wait there. Maybe Ganesha was still alive? Maybe he would find his way back. I knew he didn't believe it. Neither did I. We spent 2 more days in the hut. We were running out of food. We were running out of fuel for the stove. The weather began to deteriorate. The wind picked up, the sky clouded over, and the first snowflakes began to swirl in the air. On the 7th night, it came. I was awake, sitting by the door, listening to the wind howling through the cracks between the stones. The captain and the doctor were lying against the opposite wall, wrapped in their sleeping bags. The lamp gave off a faint light, and shadows danced on the walls. First came the smell. It seeped through the cracks in the door, thick and heavy, and I felt nausea rising in my throat. Then came the sound. Footsteps outside, heavy, measured, unhurried. Something large was walking around the hut. I could hear the snow crunching under its weight. Captain Ashford woke up instantly, the way soldiers do. He picked up his rifle and aimed it at the door. Dr. Penrose sat up, feeling for his revolver. The footsteps stopped at the door. Silence. 1 second, 2, 3, then a blow. The door shook, and the logs we had used to barricade it cracked. Another blow, and another. With each blow, the door bent more and more, and I could see the gaps between the boards widening, something dark flashing in them. Fur. Captain Ashford shouted for the doctor to shoot. The doctor raised his revolver with trembling hands and fired. Once, twice, 3 times. The noise was deafening, and gunpowder smoke filled the hut. The blows stopped. The silence outside was deafening. We waited, not moving, not breathing. A minute passed. 5, 10. Captain Ashford slowly approached the door. He peered through the crack between the boards and froze. He said quietly, almost in a whisper, that it was standing there, right outside the door, watching. I went over and looked too. I saw eyes. 2 eyes at the height of my head. No, higher. Yellow-green, reflecting the light of the lamp like a cat's. They didn't blink. They looked straight at me. Then the creature stepped back, and I saw more. A silhouette, huge, stooped, with shoulders of incredible width. A conical head, elongated upward and backward. Arms, long below the knees with something dark at the ends of the fingers. It stood motionless, and I could feel its gaze. Meaningful, appraising. Not the gaze of an animal, the gaze of a thinking creature. Then it struck its chest with both palms, making a dull sound like a drumbeat. And it disappeared. I didn't see it leave. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. Only the tracks in the snow and the smell that lingered in the air for a long time. We didn't sleep until dawn. The captain sat by the door with his rifle. The doctor reloaded his revolver and muttered something. A prayer or a curse. I wrote down everything I saw in my notebook. My hand was shaking, and the letters came out crooked. At dawn, the captain said we had to leave. He said we had lost 2 men and couldn't risk the rest. The doctor agreed. So did I. We gathered what little we could carry. Samples, notebooks, weapons. We left the tents, most of the food, and the plaster casts of footprints. We left the hut when the sun rose above the ridge. By noon, a blizzard had begun. The snow came suddenly. The sky, which had been clear an hour ago, was covered with a gray veil, and the first snowflakes turned into a solid wall. The wind blew in our faces, blinding us and knocking us off our feet. We held on to each other, trying not to lose our direction. We were lost. By evening, the blizzard had subsided, but we didn't know where we were. All around us were rocks, snow, and glacial moraines. No trails, no landmarks. Captain Ashford took out his compass, but the needle jerked around, unable to determine the direction. We found shelter in a small cave in the rock, just big enough for the 3 of us to squeeze into. There was no way to build a fire. We had no fuel left. We sat in the dark, huddled together, and waited for morning. Around midnight, I heard that sound again. A low roar turning into a whistle. It seemed closer than before. Much closer. Captain Ashford told us quietly not to move. He said the creature was hunting. Dr. Penrose asked who. No one answered. By morning, the blizzard had started again. We got out of the cave and went down, or where we thought the bottom was. The snow was hitting our faces, and we could barely see each other. The captain went first, the doctor second, and I brought up the rear. I don't know exactly when it happened. At some point, I turned around and saw that no one was behind me. Only a white wall of snow, I shouted. No one answered. I went back, or thought I was going back, but the tracks had already been covered by snow. I wandered in the blizzard, not knowing where I was going, until I stumbled upon a rock. I pressed my back against it. I waited. The blizzard subsided by evening. I looked around and saw that I was standing on the edge of a glacial moraine. A chaos of huge boulders covered with snow and ice. Between the rocks were dark hollows and caves. And then I heard a moan, a human moan. Weak, intermittent, coming from somewhere deep inside the moraine. I followed the sound. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to find the captain or the doctor. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight anymore. I found a cave. The entrance was narrow. I could barely squeeze through sideways, but it widened inside. I went in, holding onto the wall. It was completely dark, but a strip of light was coming in from somewhere above, a crack in the ceiling. The smell hit me first. The same smell. Musk, copper, decay, blood, but 100 times stronger. My stomach clenched, and I barely managed to keep from vomiting. Then I saw the bones. They were everywhere, on the floor, along the walls, piled up in corners. Human and animal mixed together. Skulls, ribs, vertebrae, shin bones. Some were old, yellowed with age. Some were fresh, with bits of flesh still attached. I recognized Captain Ashford's jacket. It lay against the far wall, torn and blood-stained. Next to it was his rifle, bent in half as if it had been broken with bare hands. I didn't see the doctor, only his glasses, round, metal-rimmed, trampled on the floor. I stood motionless, unable to move, when I heard a sound behind me. Breathing. Heavy, slow, steady. I turned around. It stood deep inside the cave where the light from the crack did not reach. At first, I could only see its silhouette. Huge, stooped, its head almost touching the ceiling. Then it took a step forward, and a strip of light fell on its face. I saw. The face was almost human. That was what was most terrifying. The proportions were human. The eyes were deep-set, dark brown with a yellow glint. Human. The nose was flat and broad. Human. The lips were thick and cracked. Human. But the brow ridges protruded so much that they cast a shadow over the eyes. The lower jaw was massive, jutting forward. The head was conical in shape, with a powerful crest on top like a gorilla's. The body was covered with long, tangled hair. Reddish-brown on the back and shoulders, almost black on the chest and stomach. The hair was matted in places, torn out in patches in others. Old scars. On the left shoulder was a jagged scar, similar to a bullet or knife wound. It limped on its left leg, an old injury. Its arms were disproportionately long and muscular, with palms the size of shovels. Its fingers were thick, with black, curved claws, but its thumb was opposable like a human's. It looked at me. Its gaze was meaningful, appraising, not the gaze of an animal, not the gaze of a beast, the gaze of a creature that thinks, a creature that decides. I waited for death. 1 second, 2, 3. It didn't move. It just stared, with those brown eyes with a yellow glint. And I felt its gaze piercing through me, taking me apart, reading me like a book. Then it turned away. It just turned away and disappeared into the darkness of the far part of the cave, where the light didn't reach. I backed toward the exit. I don't remember how long it took. I don't remember what I stumbled over. I only remember that I got outside, into the cold, into the snow, into the blinding light of day, and ran. 3 days. I ran for 3 days. Down, always down, along slopes, scree, glaciers. I fell, got up, fell again. I frostbitten the fingers on both hands. I lost a boot and wrapped my foot in rags. I ate snow. I didn't sleep. On the 4th day, I reached base camp. I was found by a patrol. 2 Sherpas returning from a reconnaissance mission. They later said that I looked like a dead man. Gray, bloodied, muttering something incoherent. They carried me to camp on a stretcher. The expedition doctor examined me and said it was a miracle I was alive. 2nd-degree frostbite, exhaustion, dehydration, early stages of hypothermia. I told them everything. The investigation commission, journalists, expedition leaders, doctors. I told them again and again about the tracks, the cave, the creature, how it looked at me. They didn't believe me. Altitude sickness, the doctor said. Hypoxia, traumatic psychosis, hallucinations caused by cold and exhaustion. The other 45 members of the expedition returned without a shred of evidence. Some had seen the tracks, but they could have belonged to a bear. Some had heard screams, but they could have been echoes of rock falls. No one had seen the creature. No one had found the bodies. Rescue teams combed the area I had indicated. Fresh snowfall had covered all traces. The cave was not found. The Royal Geographical Society refused to pay the reward. No material evidence. Captain Reginald Ashford, Dr. Arthur Penrose, Timothy Blackwood, and Ganesh Thapa are officially considered dead as a result of an accident in the mountains. An avalanche or a fall into a crevasse. That's what the documents say. I returned to London in the spring of '51. Journalists wrote about the tragedy and hallucinations. The scientific community wrote me off. By '55, I had stopped giving interviews. 45 people combed those mountains and found nothing. They say the Yeti does not exist, but I think differently. 45 people, and they all came back. There were 5 of us. We wandered too far, saw too much, and I was the only one who returned. Maybe it wasn't us who were hunting. Maybe it was choosing who to let in and who to leave behind. Even now, 30 years later, I wake up in the middle of the night from nightmares. I dream of a cave, bones on the floor, light from a crack in the ceiling, and eyes, dark brown with a yellow glow, staring at me. Meaningful, appraising, almost human. I never understood why it let me go. Maybe I was too weak to be of interest. Maybe it wanted someone to survive and tell the tale. Maybe the llama was right, and one of us had to return with what we didn't want to know. I know now. Some boundaries should not be crossed. Some mountains do not belong to humans. And when the silence becomes too complete, when the birds disappear and the air carries the scent of musk and copper, it is time to leave. And I know that if I ever hear that sound again, that low roar turning into a piercing whistle that makes your ears pop, no reward, no order, no scientific curiosity will make me take another step toward the mountains. Because I saw its eyes, and I know it saw mine.